Greetings. In this video, let's look at how to farm in Sengoku Dynasty. We'll look at how to farm from a villager's perspective when you assign it to a villager, or when you do it yourself, and what you'll need in order to accomplish that task. Welcome, this is Keen Fool, and this is one of my quick guides for Sengoku Dynasty. First off, what are we going to need to do in order to farm in the first place? Well, you're going to need a hammer, and we're going to need to make a field. In order to make a land field, you're going to go into village structures and farming, and then you're going to find land field, and it's going to cost you 1 stick for each square. Now, for now, as of the Kaizen update, it only matters that you have 25 squares. So I do 5x5s. That way I have my 25 squares. They will only work up to 25 squares at this time. Before, they would work based upon their happiness, and when they implement happiness again, it will be back on that again. And at that point, I was able to get workers up to 31 slots. So now for village structures, again, we'll go here and we'll go to farming, and now we'll build ourselves a water field. Now with the land field, you'll notice that it just sits flatly on the ground. We'll build this one as well. We'll left click and then we walk to make a grid. And then when I want to figure out what size is it, if I can't tell if it's 3x3 or right now it's a 5x4, I can tell by the number of resources that I see on the lower left hand corner. Now it's 25 clay and 25 stone. That makes it a 5x5. That'll be a 25 plot. Obviously place it somewhere where you want it to be. I'm just placing it here for now just because of the video demonstration. If you don't like where you placed it, go to demolish, click it 3 times and it will be destroyed. And that's just by going to, when your hammer is out, right clicking, up to demolish, and then you can highlight it when it turns this orangish reddish color. 3 clicks and it'll be destroyed. If you want to stop doing this action, you just right click again, and now you're back on your normal action. Something to note with your land placements is that your water fields highly depend on the height difference from one part where you place it to another, and they will always be built flat. So this allowed me to make this kind of rice step looking area. So this can be a creative way for organizing things if you want. When you build your fields, just remember that the water fields always depend on height and they have to be flat, whereas land fields will just join the terrain. Alright, with that, we now have a field. The easiest way to do farming is to have a villager do it, in all honesty. And all you need for that are seed bags, and your seed bags go into your general storage. Seed bags can be crafted at a tailor's workshop table. It can be crafted by you or villagers. You will note that they're in the lower left-hand corner. Land seed bags are here, and they have different costs. I was going to say a very general trend where it seems to be about 25 per bean and cereal, and then I was going to say it's about 5 per vegetable, but then garlic is 5 and gobo is 25, and 10 per herb, but garlic is 5 and parsley is 10 and ginger is 10. So it just depends. One thing worth noting is that it's always 4 leather. For lotus and for the water bags, it's always 4 leather, but it's a different cost for them. Now where you get those resources is sometimes you can find them out in the wild. You can just pick them as you walk by, or you can harvest them with the kama. The other place you can get them is Aratani. When you're in Aratani, you can either buy the raw ingredients if you're looking for herbs and certain vegetables and mushrooms, but you can't plant mushrooms, by the way, and beans here from the healer or the Orasagu. And you can also buy from the farming trader. The farming trader will sell you seed bags outright, and these change each season. So if you don't see the seed bag you were looking for, you can always buy it the next time around. You can also buy the ingredients here, and they tend to be very cheap. And remember the different costs for each of them, and those will have been on the screen before, and you can reference them again here. Now, when you want to buy buckets, if you plan to fertilize or do the work on your own, you can also buy your tools from this individual as well, and they tend to be fairly cheap. It's easy to buy them here. Fertilizer as well if you don't have access to it. While you're in Aratani, if you want to harvest some of their fields for free resources, you'll notice that they do have fields that have a number of just vegetables or herbs, and you can harvest these fields if you prefer to make the bags yourself. As you can see, wasabi we have here, we have taro, and we had parsley before, and we had leeks in the other one. You will also find them in the wild. Here we are with wasabi again, leeks again, a little bit taro again, and a lot more taro here, and a lot more parsley. You can also find some gardens outside of Iwasaki. With that, let's assign some workers to our jobs. When we go into workers and we go into jobs, by the way, I click N and then I go to jobs, and then I'm looking for some of my fields. If I click on one of my water fields, this was a field of size 10. If I want a person to work here, I would click, and then I just find a person who's in the region. And then I just need to find a recipe bag that is available that season. I would highly recommend that you grow rice since it can grow all of the seasons, and it's a base for many, many ingredients and will produce food for you quite effectively. With rice, we can click here, and then all we need is a rice bag. When I've clicked on it, I now have rice, and I have this. You'll notice it says 0. It says 0 because this person doesn't live in this area. So the reason for that is simply because my person doesn't actually live in the village that I assigned them. That's one mistake that might happen along the way. You may not recognize who's in which space, or you may have moved a bunch of people like I did, and you don't realize that that's not the space they are. So if you notice you're getting zeros, it's probably because the person's in the wrong spot. It's either that or it's the wrong season. Spring is the green leaf icon, summer is the sun icon, and autumn is the fall leaf, orange leaf. There are no icons for winter because there are no crops to plant in the winter, but you will note that the Forager's hut does definitely have a winter gathering item. So that was a water field. With a land field, it's the exact same story. Flax has not been fully implemented yet, so I don't recommend going for that. Definitely pay attention to seasonality with this one. I highly recommend that if you don't already have soy or tea in your village inventory, that during the spring you definitely get these ones started. Soy produces a lot of product, which is nice, and tea produces a lot of product, and it helps with beverages very quickly and can be a nice thing to have around. Now, one more thing to do while we are here. When we click on needs, please go to meals, and you'll notice that there's this arrow that you can click. If you do not want your villagers to eat a certain resource, for example, if I'm trying to plant things and I don't want my villagers eating my soybeans, all of these will be checked at the start, by the way. I have unchecked every one of them just so that they don't eat anything because I wanted to test out how many resources each field produces. So at the start, you'll show up with all these things checked. If you go in here and you say, wait, I don't want people eating all of the eggs, I'm supposed to be cooking all of them. So you can uncheck it, or hey, I don't want them eating lingonberries and wineberries. I have recipes I need to make for health potions with that. Uncheck it and they will not eat it. And by the way, as of this current part of the update, needs don't matter, and you'll notice that my villagers are producing at a standard amount. Happiness hasn't been implemented yet, so this is a future thought portion. Well, let's say that I want to do the farming. Why not? I'm playing the game and I want to have fun, and you know what? I want to farm. Let's go for it. So what I would do is, if I want to work a land field or a water field, it's a little different depending upon things. There's always a first step. As you and the main character, you have to take a hoe, by the way. You have to make a hoe in your smithy or in your workshop. The workshop, you can make the wooden hoe, which costs a very small amount of resources. And in the smithy, you have to create the iron hoe. They don't cost a lot to make, and honestly, they don't cost a lot to buy either. So with the wooden hoe, it just costs you 2 planks. And with the iron hoe, it will cost you 2 planks and 1 iron. And it's bought with 40 gold or 90 gold, not too much at all. A kama is built in the smithy and is fairly straightforward in how much it costs to make. Not very expensive to buy either, as you can see here. It's 50 to sell. Steel kama is fairly cheap as well, and so is the masterwork. Honestly, if you have the money, it's easier to just go about that. If you're going to craft your own fertilizer bucket, that can be a little bit of a hassle. You need some rot first. I have rot because there's been many seasons and I've left things sit out, so I'd have rot. You can also simply buy the rot from the beggars who are at the temple. You can also buy the water bucket and the fertilizer bucket from the farming seller in Aratani as well, and they're really not expensive at all. So it's pretty straightforward. And buckets are easy to make as well. They cost you 1 plank, and you're going to end up having a ton of them anyway since you need to gather water. We will need to have a water bucket, which is crafted using a single bucket and water, and a fertilizer bucket, which is made by putting rot into a compost bin. And to make a compost workstation, my apologies, you go to village structures, you go to farming, and you go to composting workstation, which will take you 10 plank, 5 stick, and again, rot, which you could buy from the beggars if you don't already have it. Once you do that, you hold down E to add your rot to this workstation, and it will turn into a fertilizer bucket over time. It does take a long while, so I do recommend that if you're planning on doing the farming, make one of these as soon as you can get away with it so you can start making this happen and buy rot from that person at the temple, or let some things sit out and rot. How long does it take? It depends on the resource, and you just let it go. Alrighty, with that, let's farm. We need to start with a first phase, which is cultivation. It takes 3 strikes in order to cultivate. If you hold down the left button, it will simply cultivate for you. For the purposes of this video, we're only going to do 10 spots. You can do the same thing in a water field, so it's the same story. You'll notice that the texture does look different, so you can tell that you did the work. There we are. Now we have 2 fields, 10 plots each in a water field and a land field. The next thing we need to do is we need to have our field, or our type of seed that we want in our inventory. I put it on inventory slot 9, and now I'm going to go through and place them. So just left click and they place in. You notice that as soon as they're placed in, you see this kind of like different texture on the bottom, and you'll also see that there's now a single arrow, a little sideways facing carrot or a sideways arrow end on it. That shows us that it is growing at a single arrow's worth of rate. The most we'll get up to, I believe, is 3. So here we are, we're starting this out. And then we'll switch to our land crop. And again, you have to be mindful of the seasons, right? We have to be mindful of what season we plant these in. And since these are both spring growing seasons, they're okay. You'll notice that the durability of the bag is going down in the lower right hand corner each time that I do this. Your fields get a fixed amount of durability drop when your workers use them. For you, it goes down each click. Okay, so we've planted these things. Everything's good to go, right? Not quite. It says it can be fertilized. So the next thing we need to do is take our fertilizer bucket and equip it, and then go up there and drop some slop in here. So we'll go up and we'll drop slop. We left click, and then you get a very satisfying plopping sound, and then you're on the way. And this can be done to both fields. And you notice that now we have 2 arrows. 2 arrows meaning we're growing at twice the original rate. You can just, at this point, let it go, and it will grow. But it's definitely best to, if you're going to do this, it's best to get it growing as quick as you can. Now, land fields also say they can be watered, and you notice that they have a 0. They have no arrows right now. I just have seeds down there, and there's nothing happening. In order to get the first arrow, you have to water it first or fertilize it first to get the first arrow. In order to water it, we're going to have to take our water bucket, and we're going to have to bring that here. And again, we'll drop our satisfying plops on here. Just a very entertaining sound. And then let's get that last one. From here, we need a water bucket. Our water fields are convenient in the sense that you don't need to water them. They're already flooded, so that's really convenient. With the water bucket, you get to water these fields. If it rains, by the way, when you plant your field, that counts as being watered. So in other words, if I got lucky enough that it started raining right now, I wouldn't have to water the rest of these plots. It's convenient, but you can't guarantee it, so might as well just water it. From here, you can see that we start having changes. You notice there's small little sprouts coming up, and there will be small sprouts coming up over here too. Let's check on this again a little later, and the next thing we'll do is weed it out. And when we weed it out, we will gain a small amount of resources, and we'll also gain some speed and growth. Well, we took a little nap to wait for the crops to grow a little higher, and indeed you can see it does actually work to have it grow while you sleep. In the past that didn't actually work, which is interesting. So you can pass the time if you like to allow the crops just to grow. Notice that the rate that they grow is not fast, but I could be doing anything else I want right now. So I could have planted these in the morning and just ran off and did a bunch of quests through the whole day so that then I come back later on and harvest away. As soon as your crops get large enough, you notice that they say they can be weeded out. You hold down E and you weed them out, and you'll notice that you collect a little bit of straw, which is kind of handy. It's a nice little freebie thing. Is it going to really make the difference between you having straw and not having straw? No. But it is something that will help the growth, by the way. So now that we've weeded it out, we will see that there are now 3 arrows worth of growth on this when they grow, and they will grow much faster than before. Same story in the water field. You can weed them out, and they will grow much faster than before. You will notice that this produces grass, though. So with the land field, it produced straw. With the water field, it produces a weeding out, which is grasses. On that note, one more farming item that we can think about, a structure that can be really handy for you in conjunction with, or in combination with, that is, the forager's hut, is the drying rack. So let's say that you have a forager's hut. In a forager's hut, you can produce 149 grass per season, and that is harvestable in multiple seasons. When you have those grasses, You can take them and you can just simply place them in the drying rack, and this will produce straw for you at a rather fast rate. And this is a great way to generate some straw. It also turns into a villager job, so that if you're producing a lot of grasses, as in you have somebody in the forager's hut or in multiple forager huts producing grasses, you can have them producing the grasses for you and then have another villager who is producing straw for you, which can be really handy over time. When we finish up the fields here, all we're going to do is harvest, and we'll compare the yields we get. When your crops are done, you're going to notice that they change their look. You notice how these are changing from their standard green look to having a little fluffy yellowed top, and now we can harvest them. So from there, we're going to just equip our kama, and we go up here, and we swing. And you swing anywhere within the region, and you should get them. You can do a very wide swing and gather a huge amount if you want. Sorry for the fast pan, but that's to get the whole wide swing to get it working. You can get almost 2 squares per if you do it carefully, but sometimes you miss and you get nothing. Okay, that was a plot worth of 10. I got 55 grass, 45 koji mode, and 159 of my rice. So when we think about that, how does that compare? It's a perfect lead into what we want to talk about next here, which is yields. The yields of our fields depend on their type. And in general, you'll see on the screen here what those yields are. Generally, your vegetable crops, which, by the way, if you're looking to find out, is something a vegetable, is something not a vegetable? With your foods, there's icons. So here, turnip, when I click on it, you'll see vegetables here. When I look at wheat, it's called cereal here. Millet is also a cereal. Ginger is considered an herb. This is just considered a meat or a consumable. Berries are considered a fruit. Taro is considered a vegetable. Mushrooms are considered either edible mushrooms or poisonous mushrooms. You have a lot of options for herbs. By the way, soybeans count as a bean. That doesn't surprise you. But canola counts as a bean, and lotus seeds count as a bean. So those are our 3 ways to get access to beans. The forager's hut is a handy way to get certain resources. You notice that there are a number of things, and I'll put on here the resources that you can gain from the forager's hut in their comparative amounts per season. They do not produce at the same level as a farm field. It's just not the same. So if you try to harvest gobo from here versus having a field for a gobo, you're better off with the field full of gobo than you would ever be here. This is a space where you can get some of the resources that you cannot otherwise easily attain. So my suggestion is that if you're thinking about how am I utilizing my structures, your forager's hut is getting you the mushrooms that are oh so handy for some of these recipes, or berries, because berries can be handy for some of the health recipes. But don't think of this as a spot to make up for anything in the farming fields. Farming fields always produce better than a forager's hut. And I tend to use my forager's hut for the mushrooms, keeping in mind that anything that is a mushroom that is edible will always produce a 19 per time, and you sometimes start with the 0. Notice how it started at 0, you got to click it to max in order for it to work. If it's an edible mushroom, you will get 19 per harvest, or per slot. So I'd highly recommend you use these to gather the mushrooms, and not to gather anything that is farming field related. These can be handy for medicines, by the way. So why would you want a poison mushroom? Medicines. And again, keep in mind the seasonality. Certain mushrooms can be harvested in certain seasons. Since meat is a part of making some of our meals, it's important to also note how much you can gain from your different buildings as well. The fishing hut can produce 16 fish per slot, which is to say 64 meat if you have all fish on. You can also be getting seashells if you're looking to get money. For hunting, it's going to depend on the knife you use, and you can see on the screen here I have a comparison. 25 meat for a masterwork steel blade, and then 20 for a steel blade, and 16 for iron, and 8 for your stone. That allows you to have a different amount. You can have up to 100 meat if you're doing all masterwork knives. It will cost you a lot of resources, but honestly, it will get you a lot of meat as well. I tend to go with just the steel. I'm going to get less, but not by a huge amount. So what are you supposed to do with all the resources you're making? Well, number one, you're going to want to cook most of them. They don't produce quite as much food if you just eat them raw. And so my suggestion is, first off, make sure you've unchecked these so that your people aren't simply eating everything that you're harvesting. So I don't want them harvesting these mushrooms when I harvest them. No way. I need them to be there so I can cook them. You can tell them which kind of meals you want them to eat, as in if you only want them eating cooked rice and you're like, no, that's all we're doing, then you can easily just check that. you notice that it'll tell me how much food I need here, and it'll tell me how much we have in our inventory here. So if I do this, I now have 210 of the needs out of my 756. And I can allow them to eat all the rest of these things to allow us to actually feed them. But we're not quite there yet, so let's make some of these meals. When you make a cooking hearth here, the houses always start out with the basic setup. So for example, in this home, we just have the simple sunken hearth. When you press, my apologies, when you press F, you can change it to the sunken cooking hearth with pot, workspace, or the cooking pot. You'll need the resources shown on the screen here, which is to say stone, firewood, a cooking pot, which costs you 6 iron and is made in your smithy or is bought, and planks. Once you have that, you can make your basic meals, which is to say simple meals and solid meals. Any of the meals can be made over here, and medicines as well. Tea is a very handy way to handle beverages. So with vegetable meals, you notice you can make 3 simple meals, and 3 solid meals. We will compare those in just a bit. With the fishing, you can do simple meals and solid meals. Only 2 though. And with meat, you can do your 3 simplest meals and your 3 solid meals. And they have differing costs, so you may look at those and you may say, which one's better? Which one counts for different? And the answer is they don't. So when you make a simple meal, it's always 25 of your villager's hunger needs. If you make a solid meal, it's always 50 of your villager needs. And if you make an excellent meal, it is 70 of your villagers' eating needs. And it does not matter which kind you made, they always count for the exact same thing. So in other words, if I make 2 of the first simple meal and then another simple meal that's a different type, if they're all meat simple meals, they stack all the same because they are the same. Now, if you want to be able to make excellent meals, you have to make the structure you see here, which is the kitchen. With your hammer out, you simply go to buildings, you go to production, and you find yourself a kitchen. And then you make it, place it wherever you like. Once you do so, you're going to have to go in here and you're going to have to change type. You want to make the sunken hearth with the big cooking pot. It's going to require chiseled stone, which is either purchased or made in your mining facility, firewood, planks, and a cooking pot, again, which costs you 6 iron to make in your smithy. Once you make it, you end up with the big cooking pot. When you click on this one, it looks the same as last time. However, I can now make excellent meals. And these excellent meals do provide 70 food. You'll also notice that you can make nariazushi, which is handy, but also we'll talk about that in a moment, about which one's better and which one's not. And here you have all the diverse needs here. The reason you would do this is that you can make excellent meals. That's the benefit. Please note that you can make oil in either of these, and you can make cooked rice in either of these, and you can make cooked meat in anything from the fire pit up, and cooked eggs, but they don't produce quite the food level as the others. With that, which ones are the best ones to make? And let's look at it from here in the perspective of our best cooking area. What I've found is that for vegetable meals, if you're going to go all vegetarian, 10 soybeans and 1 koji mold is the way to go. This gets you a meal of 50, and it only costs you 10 soybeans, and you're producing 400 per 25 plots. This will go a long way for you, and it'll be the simplest way to get there without having to use water or berries or other herbs, which you could have better suited for other things. There are, when you get to the excellent meals, they're very specific and they require oil, which to me is a non-starter. If you want to do it for RP purposes, have fun. You go crazy with it, but I tend to find those as unnecessarily expensive. Cooked rice, by the way, gets you food worth of 40, needs worth of 40, and only costs you 10 rice and 1 water. That's solid. It's not bad. As far as our fish meals are concerned, I find that the best one that you can go for is the solid meal, where we are simply looking for 1 fish, 4 herbs, and 1 edible mushroom. Since I can get so many edible mushrooms easily from a forager's hut, and herbs grow at 325 for garlic, or 225 for parsley if you go with that, it doesn't take a lot to be able to get that. And with this, now my herbs are serving the purpose of making fish meals, and I don't need to use those for my veggie meals. It is also worth noting that one of the excellent meals is actually a really handy one to go with, which is when we look to our 1 raw fish, 5 cereal, and 10 beans. Honestly, this is fantastic. This will get you 70 food for a single fish, 10 beans, which you're making 400 per plot with 25 plots, and your rice is producing at 500 or 400 as well. This is a really efficient way to get there and a really handy way to utilize the excellent meals. With meat, I tend to find that really the one that wins the day is This isn't bad. The excellent meal where you have 2 meat, 4 cereal, and 4 beans is not bad, but it costs 2 meat, which is pretty expensive. What I tend to go with is right here. 1 meat, 4 rice, and 2 edible mushrooms. Again, edible mushrooms, you're going to be producing a fairly significant amount if you have a couple forager huts. This will be a non-issue for you very quickly once you start making the forager huts and just have a worker on this. And as long as you uncheck the box for it, you can have those mushrooms stored over time. Now with this though, having a low amount of rice is handy, but you're going to produce a lot of rice, so it's not a huge deal. You can then use that rice elsewhere in other meals. So you can just simply make cooked rice or whatever else you wish to do. Water takes care of beverages of 4 you can see here, and I can just click on these to see if I'm having somebody else craft it. Honestly, it's much better that way. Tea does get you a little further along, which is nice. Now you can also use sake as a beverage, and it can take care of beverage needs, but I will strongly suggest that that's not worth it, since sake is used in a number of recipes for medicines, and that's a much better place for it to be applied. But if you want to make sake for your villagers because you want them having fun, you go crazy with it and you have a good time. With that, that is all I have in this video as far as farming is concerned. I appreciate you taking the time to join me for this. I apologize that I sound rather nasally. It is that season and time of the year where I get nasally and have wonderful times with my sinuses. Take care until next time, and I hope you enjoy your time playing Sengoku Dynasty. Take care until then.